Hello and welcome to Travel Better. My name is Hannah and I'm your Sustainable Adventure Travel Specialist. Today I'm joined by Allison May from Wilderness Safaris. Wilderness Safaris has lodges throughout Southern and Eastern Africa, and they've also developed sustainable tourism and regenerative tourism policies that I'm really excited to talk about today. Thank you so much for being here, Allison.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about you and about Wilderness Safaris.
So I am born and bred in Cape Town and studied nature conservation and worked in Natal for about 25 years in various lodges and game reserves, and then moved back to Cape Town when I joined Wilderness Safaris. Been with them for 10 years, and I know I'm biased, but it's the most incredible company. As hopefully everyone will see with this presentation as we go through it and chat about what Wilderness Safaris has done, and our ethos and our mission. And one of my favorite speakers is Simon Sinek, and he talks about having a purpose, and you don't have to be a leader or a driver of that purpose, but as long as it fills your own goals and your own beliefs, you can adopt that purpose, and that's why it's so easy for me to work for Wilderness Safaris, because they're very, very similar.
That's awesome. Yeah, as I've learned about them for sure. This is why I wanted to talk to you today, because this company is incredible. So
yeah. So and just to start off with, we've won 2 different sustainable tourism leadership awards through Virtuoso, 2013 I think it was, and 2017, and then actually last year 2021 they had a different system, obviously with the pandemic and COVID and everything, and Wilderness Safaris won the award for our conservation heroes during the pandemic, and all that we've managed to do for our community surrounding our lodges.
Wow.
So just to start off with, I thought we would have a basis of what sustainability means, and this is a dictionary definition, which is living within the resource of the planet without damaging the environment now and in the future. And I think the in the future part is really, really quite crucial. And there are 4 pillars, and Wilderness Safaris has the same sort of concept. So sustainability has 4 pillars. There's a human, economic, social, and environmental element. Wilderness Safaris has exactly the same. We've got commerce, community, culture, and conservation. So it's really based on what sustainability is all about. Right. Just to quickly take you through, as you said in the beginning, where we operate out of Southern Africa, and we have 41 different lodges throughout Southern and East Africa. I've got a map just to show you. So the green part of Africa is referred to as Southern Africa, and 6 different countries where we have our own lodges. And then we act as what we call a DMC, or a destination management company for South Africa. So through you, we can help your clients book a one-stop shop safari, and if they want to add on to Cape Town or Johannesburg, we can do that as well. Just to touch very briefly, because there are so many lodges and obviously quite a few different countries, and we want to get to why we do what we do in this talk. So I'm just going to very quickly run through the different countries that we operate and my sort of unique selling points for that country. Namibia is obviously all about its size and space and scenic beauty. And I put here stupendously in other words, just the most incredible, phenomenal desert adapted wildlife. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily as a first time destination, but it has the most incredible wildlife. Zambia, I like to refer to as wildest Africa, still very raw and wild, and not many people go to Zambia, not many people know about it. Zimbabwe, also another hidden gem, excellent value for money and phenomenal wildlife experiences. Rwanda, so much more than just gorillas, and we'll talk a little bit more about Rwanda and our conservation success story later on. But when we talk about sustainability, it's not just about a lodge or the wildlife, but it's also about the country. And if you can, what Wilderness Safaris has done in Rwanda and in other countries as well, is created a circuit. So you don't just go in like in the past, 30 years ago when Rwanda was famous for its gorillas. You flew in 2 nights, saw gorillas, ticked the box and left again. That's not necessarily sustainable. Now you can go to Magashi in Akagera National Park and have the most incredible savanna safari experience. And we're developing a chimpanzee habituation program in Gishwati, so you can go and do chimp trekking, and that then creates the circuit within the country, and then adding to the sustainability of the travel for all of those pillars, for the community, for the conservation, and obviously for the economy of that country. And then Botswana, it's the holy grail of safaris. It's probably my favorite if I had to choose. There's 3 distinct different biomes in the country, and you'll see as well as we chat. Each lodge has a purpose, whether it be a community purpose or a conservation purpose behind each lodge.
So would you recommend Botswana for like a first time safari client?
I would.
Yeah. Okay.
I would, very much so. And ironically, or maybe surprisingly, over a South African safari. Okay. So this picture is taken in Kruger, and it's not sustainable. It's lots of people, lots of traffic. You've got any reserve or national park in South Africa is fenced, and if you have a fenced area, you have to have man-made intervention, because otherwise you get overstocking or overgrazing, which then affects the environment and affects all the animals, it affects the health of the animals. And if you look, so that is not what Wilderness Safaris is about at all. This is what we're about. So in the old days, so Wilderness Safaris we're in our 39th year, so we're 39 years old, and our ethos or our mission has been the same for, things have come and gone, things have changed, countries have changed, people have changed, but the core element of what we're about has always remained the same. We started off being a visionary tour operator, where we said we want a low impact. So our camps are very small. The biggest is 22 people. Wow. The smallest is 8.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so you're often on have wildlife scenes, wildlife all by yourself. You'll be the only vehicle. Or a maximum of 2 other vehicles, as opposed to that previous slide where there's no control and the poor wildlife also suffers. So we talk about we talked about a low impact model, an ecotourism model with low impact using high-end luxury safaris. And we would take over 5% of profits and give that back to conservation projects, as you'll see later, and communities. And that is our Children in the Wilderness, which is the private NGO, which is in the NGO, and our Wildlife Trust, which is also an NGO. So those are the two NGOs that look after those proceeds and do all the giving back behind the scenes for wilderness safaris.
Right.
We've adapted that model because I'm sure you agree with me that sustainability or sustainable travel should now be, it should be the minimum. It should be the norm.
Absolutely.
And we've now built on that. So we've called it an impact model. And where you talked at the beginning about regenerative travel, that's the meaning of regenerative travel, where you ensure that there's a positive impact on the area that you're visiting, the country, the community, and the wildlife. So that is our why. And how we go about that is all faceted. So it's how we build our camps, where we build our camps. So, we even, you do an impact assessment before you build a lodge. And our scientists will go in and assess the area. And I've highlighted the environment. So we actually look at, is this on a game path? Is it going to affect the wildlife that are, the animal movements? Should we move it, a kilometer east or west, even if it's not spectacular in the view? We first consider the environment and the animal movements. As I mentioned, our camps are really small. So, and there's little to no impact. Most of our lodges have all of these. So there's environmental minimum standards of how we build our lodges. There is solar in all of our camps. Some of them are hybrid, so there's solar and diesel. But there we now have, as we rebuild lodges, they become 100% solar.
That's awesome.
And then they just have a backup generator. All the lodges recycle, even if there isn't a recycling depot. So, as you also, I'm sure, know, some, the more rural countries and communities don't necessarily have the infrastructure to be able to recycle. We will still separate all of our waste. And from Botswana, the lodges, it gets carted to Maun, the one of the sort of gateways into Botswana. It's not actually the capital, but it's the capital for flying, if you like. And there it's distributed from there. So even if there isn't local recycling, we still cart it all out. And then, we manage our waste. I think there's a different slide. So materials used for building, we make sure that there's a saying, take only photographs, leave only footprints.
Yeah.
And we honestly believe wholeheartedly in that. So we use as little concrete as we can. And if we decommission a lodge, we remove everything.
Right.
So this is one of our lodges. It's an old lodge on the Skeleton Coast in Namibia. And it needed to be moved. The situation of where the lodge wasn't great. So it was literally deconstructed. The building materials that wouldn't naturally biodegrade were driven out. And you will not be able to tell where that lodge was. There's another lodge there are a couple of lodges in Botswana. You can drive on a game drive and the guide will stop and you're like wondering what he's looking at. And he says, this is where the old camp was built. You cannot tell. Yeah, you just can't tell. So it's really important, to also think about how you're going to decommission your lodge once once the time of that lodge is up. And then we had a war on waste. So we realized, and we'll talk about it a little bit later about our food print. So it's not only about a footprint now, but it's also about a food print. And we realized that we were not managing that 100% correctly a couple of years ago. And so since 2012, we used to have plastic water bottles. We started introducing reusable water bottles. We've saved over 3 million plastic bottles that have to be recycled somewhere, you know. And then just since 2017, we stopped using single-use plastic and cling wrap, which is really bad for the environment, and have already saved 3,000 kilometers of plastic.
Wow.
So, you know, we've changed menus to limit food waste. We source locally, which we'll also chat about later on.
That's awesome. Are your menus typically like a la carte, like they're made to order sort of thing?
So it's a good question, Hannah, because they were, and we had both. So we had a la carte, made to order, and we also had buffet. But with the pandemic and the health sort of regulations, we had to do away with the buffet. So yes, so majority are now a la carte and made to order.
Okay.
And then obviously all the staff that are at the lodge as well are cooked for by our staff chef. So, you know, some of the excess, obviously, if there is excess, then that also gets shared with the staff in the lodge too. Yeah. Great. So just to touch on one of the pillars, so communities, and I wanted to share one of my favorite recent. It's a different take on sustainability, in that it's preventing or mitigating human wildlife conflict.
Right.
So if you have a community in an area and they're on the borderline of you know, this is Damara land. It's dry, it's barren, there's very little rain, very little natural vegetation, and the pastoralists, they're farmers that subsist on the finest of margins in the area, where the predation of just a few of their goats or livestock would be huge for them. It would be, you know, it would be astronomical in their world.
Right.
So what we did through the Wildlife Trust was, and Nick Stunder, who's done 30 odd years of lion research. So these are free-ranging lions. So they don't belong to anybody. They're completely wild. They live in this Damara land where they eke out an existence, and range over very, very wide territory, where, you know, in their quest for food and unoccupied spaces. So obviously they're wild, they don't want to come into conflict with humans, and they are truly free-ranging. But when they do come into contact with the pastoralists and they do kill livestock, then it can be equally catastrophic for the lions, because then they're shot or poisoned. So we obviously don't want that to happen. So what happened a year or two ago is we built a boma, which is like a fenced-off enclosed area. But it's interesting, because if lions can't see the prey, then they won't necessarily attack the prey. So it doesn't have to be a solid structure. This is just shade cloth, but they can't actually see the goats. We built this amazing boma for this one conservancy that we are in partnership with in Damara land, and have been since 1996. It's one of the longest standing partnerships, and the first that was ever done with a conservancy, which is a local communities. Wilderness Safaris has pioneered that in all the different countries that we operate in.
Mm-hmm.
So we built this boma. We bought 10 GPS satellite colors, which we put on the lions. And they have an early warning and 2 remote alert units. So that's what you see in the photograph. So if there's a lioness or a lion that has this color on in the area, it sets off an alarm. So the pastoralist has time to get his goats into the boma and secure them. And so then the lions obviously can't eat the goats. And it's a win-win situation for everybody, because then the pastoralists are happy to allow those, the lions to carry on free ranging and move through the area.
Right.
So it's a form of sustainability, because you're protecting and conserving the lion population, right. And which obviously then moves through our areas as well, through Hanap, where the lodge is, and through Damaraland, where Damaraland camp is, and that obviously is huge attraction for our guests. They obviously want to see lions. So that's just one of the many stories about how Wilderness Safaris assists the communities in the areas where we operate.
That's incredible. And I love, that's not something you would think about, right? When you think about sustainability, you think, oh, let's
exactly
plant trees. But yeah, you're
exactly,
by doing something so simple, you're helping the communities to maintain their income and their, livelihoods, and then you're protecting the wildlife as well. So it's such a simple solution.
Yeah. And it obviously it's a very simple solution. There's a lot of ongoing conversations with the communities all the time. And also, there's another fantastic story about our Black Rhino and Save the Rhino Trust and that partnership, and how somebody can't love something unless you value it. And if you value it, then you can understand why you want to look after it. And that's what's behind conservation. When a community, and this is a perfect example with Basati coming up, when a community can see the value that a species or an area brings through ecotourism, then they want to protect it and conserve it. And then you're A for away. Then you can ensure sustainability in the future for the next generations. So our conservation success story, but it's more than just about conservation. It's all those pillars. Was in Rwanda. We were in talks with the communities for over 2 years, sitting under a tree, chatting to the local farmers, meetings upon meetings upon meetings. They formed a cooperative. There were 123 different landowners that we spoke to. We bought this piece of land. It's a very small piece of land. I think it's 47 hectares. Never with the intention that we would be able to have another troop of gorillas. But what we wanted to do was, again, being visionary, we wanted to encourage other tour operators and other DMCs to follow suit. So we bought up this land and we started, when we told the community what our vision was, 1 or 2 of the guys started going out and they started gathering local seeds of plants within the area, and they started growing them. And then when we came back and we started building in 2016 and 17, this guy already had his little seedlings planted, and he's now our head nurseryman in Basati. And we've planted over, oh my word, over 50,000 trees, and it's part of the thing that a guest can do. And so this was the then photo, and this is the now photo.
Oh wow, what a difference!
And it's obviously all natural. It's indigenous vegetation. So what it does is it creates this little ecosystem, and you find smaller wildlife coming back. So the land that we bought was on a slope, so it's not really good for agriculture. But it creates this corridor. So we're going to talk about elephant corridors just now, but it creates this corridor. So it's borders on the national park, Volcanoes National Park, or near to it. And if your animals, your wildlife doesn't feel safe, if there's a stretch of agricultural land between the national park and another national park, they won't go through that area because it's just too dangerous for them. And it's, they would be worried about not surviving that trip. Mm-hmm. So the idea to link areas is to create corridors. And this little gem is now, I mean, it's just we've got camera traps. So we've got cameras set up on different wildlife pathways, and we've seen so much wildlife just in 6 years.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there's Janet, and there's jackal and jackal cubs, and there's the monkeys that haven't been seen in the area for years are now in Bosati. They don't live there permanently, but they frequent the area.
Cool.
And then, very exciting, last year we actually had a gorilla that came through the area and was caught on the trap. So it's such a conservation success story, but it's also about the community, because obviously everybody that works at Rwanda, and that's another thing about wilderness, is 85% of our staff are from the local surrounding areas of the lodges. And all of the staff at Rwanda are from Rwanda. And so they can see how this has developed and what a success it's been, and therefore want to, get better and do better and conserve it more. And what's also happened is our competitors have followed suit. So there are other companies now that are planting trees and getting the environment back to its natural state. So together we can do a lot.
It's a healthy form of competition, right? When you can help each other get better, really, it's better for everybody.
Yeah. And again, that's all about sustainability. It goes back to the common goal is to ensure that this planet is there for future generations. So this is just, you can go to Bosati, you'll be able to choose a tree in the nursery and then obviously plant it, and then you get a little GPS of where your tree is when you leave. And there's a strong cultural element to Bosati Lodge. The reed work was all locally made. The carpets are locally made. We had a Rwandan interior designer come and design the interiors of the lodges. It's the only lodge that has this traditional Rwandan flair to it, which I think is also really valuable for that country and that community, because then people are learning about different cultures. So that was Rwanda. And then another favorite example of mine, and one that I'm really quite passionate about, is Botswana and our elephant corridors. And then leading on from that is the food print. So I know this is a big sentence, but it's so the Linyanti concession. So if you remember at the beginning, I said all of our lodges have a purpose, and this is Dumatau and Little Dumatau, which is actually the picture of your background screen. So that's this area. It's in the Linyanti, which is in northern Botswana. It's our concession, and it's a huge concession. It's the fulcrum, it's the point where these 5 countries meet. So Angola, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. It's called the Kaza area. They all meet, and it's transfrontier, so it's across countries, and a critical part of where elephants leave. They do a mini migration naturally. So when there's less food in Botswana, they'll move into Zambia or Angola during the winter months, and then in the summer they move back again. So they constantly, they don't need passports, and they constantly move across borders at will. They use similar corridors, so they use the same path, and which is important in the research. And it's a critical mini migration for these elephants to be able to move safely from Botswana and eventually repopulate other areas, because Botswana's got, I can't remember the figures offhand, but it's like a half of the Africa's population of elephant. I mean, it's got huge numbers of elephants. So that country is able to repopulate other countries. So this area, this Linyanti, is super, super important in creating a safe passage for elephants. Again, you're going to, and this is the Lodge de Matau, you're going to come across, again, human wildlife conflict, because in northern Botswana, we have local farmers, and they obviously farming millet and sorghum and their own crops, which are probably quite tasty for elephants. And elephants don't know that they shouldn't be eating these crops, right? I mean, they just come across these food, and it's super tasty. So what we've done is we've joined partnership with EcoExist, which is a company based in Botswana. They have met and give training and teaching on agricultural processes to local farmers. And they've started farming. Wilderness Safaris supplied farming implements, million rands worth of new farming equipment, rainwater tanks because it's a very dry climate in northern Botswana. And so these farmers now grow local crops, which is obviously good because they're disease tolerant. The crops are used to the dry conditions, so they don't have to worry about water and extra rain, rainwater and various things to grow these natural crops. And the communities take what they need for their community, and then excess Wilderness Safaris buys, and we utilize in our lodge in Matau. And and that is our food print. So we've taken that sustainability or regenerative travel one step further, where we now supporting local economy and communities. We're creating these incredible menus in the lodge, which is culturally different. It ticks your wellness boxes because it's what's the word? Where you don't have flour. So it's gluten-free.
Gluten-free, yeah.
Your foodies love it because it's just so different. And then over and above that, we're teaching the local farmers about these elephant corridors. So we're coloring 10 elephants, and they're going to track the movements of these elephants to see where they go. And then over time, you can plot that on a map. And, you can go to a farmer and say, hey, this area on your farm is a used elephant path. Let's move your farm, your crops half a hectare, and then there won't be as much conflict, as an example. And it just ticks all the boxes. And then you've got this incredible menu with local produce in this 5-star ultra luxe lodge for your clients.
Oh,
and
wow.
it's
Making me hungry.
And the things that they make,
Yeah,
it's
I
just it's just incredible. And that's me. I don't know if you have any other questions. I have this lovely quote from the New York Times, which is, which was so pertinent last year and the year before, and what I said to you in the beginning, I think both you and I, sustainable travel should be the norm, where you're counterbalancing your social and environmental impacts just by traveling. And you take that now one step further, and your clients have a choice of choosing a Kruger National Park, as an example, which has a high impact negative, and I'm not saying Kruger National Park's negative, but it has impact that isn't sustainable, over somewhere that has a regenerative travel and actually making the country or the place better for that travel.
That's so important. And as more and more companies get to this baseline of like sustainable tourism should just be what we always think about, then how do we go? Where do we go from there? Well, then we can make things even better when we leave. So, where we're traveling, we need to respect the culture, the destination, and making sure that we're giving back through our travel. And I mean, travel is so important for so many reasons, but we shouldn't be traveling to the detriment of the destination that we're going to.
100%. And I think if you're, and that's where I think you as the advisor is so vitally important in this chain, because you can share with your clients, destination management companies, or tour operators that are sustainable, have a sustainable focus or a regenerative focus, as opposed to those that don't, because not all clients will necessarily know that, and then they can make informed decisions as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely it's important to me, so I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
Yes,
important to me too.
Maybe my last question would be, and this might be hard, but if you could make your ideal itinerary, where would you go? How long would you spend in different places?
So as I said in the beginning, my background is nature conservation. So I just love being out in the bush. So I would go for a very long time. And there's just so many different areas. So I mentioned Botswana and Okavango Delta. It is out of this world spectacular when you've got the inundation and the flooding, and it's not flooding as in flash flooding, it's flooding as in gradual, inch by inch, the water just meanders through the area, and then at the height of the flood you've got 3 foot of crystal clear water.
Wow.
And the wildlife's adapted to living in that environment, which fascinates me. That so everybody knows cats don't like swimming, and you have lions that are swimming around the swamps, because that's what they have to do when it's flooding. So I would definitely have the Delta on my list, and then probably Rwanda, just because it's so different. It's got it's got cultural element. It's got and the people are just, they're all over, but they are just so friendly and hospitable and so excited to have you visit their country. They realize the importance of tourism and the value that it gives their country. And especially now, wow. I mean, you know, before the pandemic, they all were, but now, I mean, we've got one of our guides, and I'm digressing a little, but Isaac from Zambia, because Zambia would be my other favorite.
Yeah.
And he wrote a Twitter, I think it was a Twitter post, when we first started getting clients again, and I think it was last year June. So Zambia, the Kafui's only open for 5 months of the year. Okay. Because of the natural rainy season. It's impossible. And he wrote, and he was going to the airport. Well, the airport. It's not an airport. It's a airstrip. You know, there's no buildings or anything there, but it's where we pick up guests when Wilderness Air flies into the lodges. So it's just the airstrip, and he was on his way to the airstrip, and he said he was crying with joy that he could welcome guests back to the Kafui. Yeah. And it's just, you know,
oh, that's really special.
Something.
Yeah.
And that's what it means to these people as well. You know, it's just, yeah.
Well, I definitely have to go visit now.
Absolutely.
Try that mindful menu for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Alison, so much for your time today. I was just so informative, and I love learning about all of these different destinations. So thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Hannah. It was lovely chatting to you.
Of course. And we'll have to have you back, and we can learn more about what Wilderness Safaris is up to in the future.
Fantastic. I look forward to that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Travel Better with myself, Hannah Elias, and Alison May from Wilderness Safaris. If you're interested in doing a safari in Africa, definitely check out Wilderness Safaris. They have incredible lodges and tons of activities to enjoy for all ages. Their website and social media are linked below. Check them out and follow them on Instagram. And then stay tuned for the next episode of Travel Better, coming soon.